welcome to gagrule.net. This is Gagrule Live on Facebook. My name is Wally Sarkeesian with our friend Peter. I think he's from Virginia, right? Right now?
Well,
Yeah.
since April, I'm from Virginia, but I'm a Southern Californian pretty much through and through. Other than being born in the Midwest, where my father was from, I'm an LA County boy, Torrance and Glendale, Burbank area.
So I will let Peter tell himself, but he's three-time Los Angeles area Emmy award-winning journalist. He does it all: produce, shoot, report, write, narrate, and edit his own short-form and long-form stories, videos, and documentary. How do you manage to do all these things, Peter?
How do I manage to do
And welcome to gagrule.net.
No, thank you. Well, thank you for having me on. I love what you're doing. I think we only could have imagined this kind of show being available 15 years ago. The idea of this kind of connection from California to anywhere in the world and this beautiful setup. Of course, the secret is that you're not just an intelligent guy who can conduct an interview. You're an IT expert, so you've also been able to put this whole thing together, and it's really exceptional, and I think it's a great service to the community. Now, probably much like your daughters who are out there flourishing and succeeding in various things, I'm a American-born Armenian who was born in Wisconsin, where my father was born and raised. Actually, his father was a genocide survivor, and he was raised in the 30s and 40s in Racine, Wisconsin. So I was born there. After my mother, who was from Istanbul, they got married in Wisconsin and moved to Los Angeles when I was a year old. So I grew up in Torrance and, got interested in a few things, but really journalism was my thing from high school. And we even went to the local community college and was the editor of the paper in Torrance, and then went to USC. And I imagined that I would just be a on-camera guy who would never touch a camera or never touch an editing system. And my first job when I was 21, 22 years old was in Great Falls, Montana, which is where you have to go if you want to be in news. You go to a smaller market. And even in the 80s, the mid and the late 80s when I was doing this, in those small markets, you did everything. You shot, you wrote, you narrated, you edited. Then I went to Texas and did the same thing. And then I went to DC and was editing. And then I came back to California. And before you know it, the world had changed. And camera equipment became, people could purchase their own camera equipment and editing systems. So I did that. And because I had the experience of having done it, I said, I want to do certain documentaries that I wasn't doing in the places I was working because it didn't fit into the format, let's say. And I picked the topics that I wanted to cover, and I was able to do it without raising thousands and thousands of dollars to hire a cameraman and an editor and a producer. And I just was able to do everything. I like to say I like to do everything at like a B+ level. If I can shoot and edit and write and narrate at that level, the final product I think is halfway decent. I always say my end product, these are, documentaries. They're not major motion pictures. It's not Schindler's List. It's not The Promise with $100 million budget. These are documentaries. And honestly, that's kind of what I like. I like news. I like reality in the true sense, not reality shows, but, reality. And I think you can learn a lot from even an above average documentary than you can learn from some other kind of fiction or something based on the truth. And that's kind of what I went into, and that's how it happened.
So I wish some of those people like that. The Promise, it was a good movie. But I wish the 100 million, a couple of million they throw in our way, We are facing the public every day, would be probably more beneficiary than just spend $100 million with what movie, which was really good movie. I know nothing. But then people like us, nobody tries send us, we get all that, hey, how good job you're doing, good work, but
yeah, I think on one hand, I think we've always kind of heard that, and we've thought that about various things. Whether people think, that wealthy millionaire gave $10 million to this cause or that cause, but I do always say, listen, those people got rich. They can do whatever they want. If they want to just spend their money on jets and hanging out in beautiful European cities, they have every right to do that. But I do think, the promise, or even with lower budgets, like what Adamagoyan has done, and these things have not been done on a large scale. Let's face it, we don't have 30 great Armenian movies out there. So your not real criticism, but it's a good observation. But I'm glad that Kirk Kerkorian did that. He could have not done it. Then we never would have had $100 million movie. Adam Goyan got money from, I think, some kind of fund that they have in Canada, and spent, I don't know, 15 million on Arat or whatever it was. And there were critics about that movie. Oh, they had this weird, story and this and that. But I enjoyed both of those movies. I'm so glad they were made. I think they're a great contribution to the world of cinema internationally. I mean, I'm glad those things were done. Now, if someone wants to send me $100 million, I'm not going to complain about it. But then someone else would say, oh, my God, they gave that guy money to do something. That's unbelievable. So thank goodness Armenians out there in the business world are successful enough. And even people that are modestly successful do contribute to a lot of things, not just movies and documentaries or whatever the case might be, but to our political American political organizations like the ANC or the Assembly, or to cultural groups, the AGBU, whatever, and just the really the dance groups, the sports groups. I think that's a strength that the Armenians have. Not just that we want to do things, we actually are out there doing things, and because everyone's got a strong opinion, and we have a lot of chiefs and not a lot of Indians, so we get a little criticism. But I'm always very impressed by how active and successful in every aspect of our American life and in the diaspora in different countries, how Armenians flourish both in their professional lives and then giving back to something that has been part of their DNA for 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years. So that's kind of where I stand on that. So anybody want to send me $100 million? I'll take the criticism.
I hope 10%. I'll take it from you when you get it. So people send me some messages. Said, is Peter a Jewish or Armenian? What is your take on that?
So they didn't read my bio on my website or anything. And the reason they're asking that question.
By the way, you said the bio on Facebook. Only thing works is picture. You could take a picture with some mountain or something. Everybody will like it. Everybody. But if you put in their articles, you're lucky if somebody would read just the first paragraph. So,
yeah, that was the problem 40 years ago. Let alone in this age where we're just inundated with information. No, I'll fall. I'm guilty of that too. There's so much to watch on TV, so much to look at on the internet, so much to read. Boy, it's. I know the handful of my Facebook friends who still read, because they'll send articles and I'll click on it and I'll say, oh my God, this is going to take me a half an hour. I'm going to have to move on to a video or something. Or being in the video business.
Okay, now tell us about your Jewish background.
Listen, the reason they're asking that question is because this most recent documentary, Holocaust Soliloquy, is about a Holocaust survivor. But if you look, listen, I went into journalism, and at first, kind of daily news journalism. You do 90-second stories, you do 2-minute stories, and if you're working for a mainstream television station like I was, you do all kinds of topics. And once again, that really always has been my interest, is kind of being a mile long and an inch thick. I have an interest in so many things. I'm very curious about things. And when I started doing these documentaries, or even doing volunteer videos for organizations, at least half of them had an Armenian theme to them. I did things for schools that were affiliated with the AGBU. I did ANC things in terms of volunteer videos, and those are all on my website. But for documentaries, you can't get away from it. Half of those have had an Armenian theme, but not everything. I'm not doing 100% Armenian all the time. I have other interests. I went to Botswana in southern Africa a decade ago, or however long ago it was, and did a half-hour documentary on that place, which was a sister city to the city of Burbank where I was working. I did that. I paid my own way. The city of Burbank didn't say, oh, here's $4,000, go off to Africa. I was interested in doing it. Now, I'm not African. I'm not Botswana. I'm not from Botswana. I have no connection to that place. But I thought it would be a very interesting story. And that was the first Emmy that I actually won, was going to Botswana and doing that. So in the course of my life, 20 years ago, I met this guy, Peter Fischel. And he was a very interesting guy. And Wally, I say this, and I think it's true for a lot of us. If you have a parent or a grandparent, or now, of course, great-grandparent, who suffered through the Armenian genocide, and that story, it's very personal to you. And I don't think that we're so that we look so inward that we don't have some kind of sympathy or some kind of understanding when we hear about a genocide in Rwanda or Darfur or Cambodia or the Holocaust, for that matter. So I was fascinated with getting to know Peter Fischel, who had been through this horror, where he was a teenager. He was a 13-year-old kid. He was in hiding during the Holocaust, and then suffered through that, and then his father was killed, and he was born into privilege, and then his life changed overnight, and then communism came in, and he finally left Hungary in 1956. So I thought his story was an interesting one. It wasn't quite the same as my grandfather's story, but there were a lot of similarities, and I never got to know my grandfather that well because I was a young child when he passed away. But anytime I had a chance to spend time with a genocide survivor or listen to interviews, of course, I was just fascinated and tried to imagine what my family had gone through. And I got a little bit of that from Peter Fischel, and that's why I wanted to do the story. Not to mention the fact that he was just a great guy who was doing this kind of service to educate kids about the Holocaust and about bigotry in general and that kind of thing, and how humanity can not be so humane all the time in this world. And I think we see that, unfortunately, much too often. There are just wars and all kinds of brutality going on all over the world. And that's why I did the documentary, not because I'm Jewish. In fact, I took the 23andMe or Ancestry.com to see what my DNA was. And a decade ago, when it wasn't quite fine-tuned, interestingly enough, it said 70% was Armenian and 30% might be Italian or Greek. And then there was even a 2%, now it's 2% European Jew. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's nice. Oh, that's great. But then they fine-tuned the way they analyze it. And about 2 years ago or a year ago, my sister said, oh, you might want to check the update on your DNA. And it was 100% Armenian. I'm sure there's something else that slipped in. Who knows? I don't know if there are any Arabs or Turks or anybody. I don't know if anything has slipped in there. But now it's 100%.
What is your grandfather's story?
My grandfather was from, we like to say Kayseri or Kayseri, but he was actually about an hour away in a really small village that no one has heard of called Jujun. And I think there are probably 100 people on Earth that might have known about that particular city. But the people from that general area, and they're a cousin of mine from the Bay Area, Nick Musurlian, sent me a book on that general area, and it has Jujun in there. And of course, that place still exists today, and it's just a village, and it's, I think, primarily Kurds, as is much of Western Armenia or Eastern Turkey. So he was from there, and he was born in 1899. So by the time 1916 rolled around, he was a healthy teenage boy who was able to survive the death march into the desert. His mother survived and his two brothers survived, but the five sisters, who knows what happened to them, if they were taken captive, if they were killed. We just assumed they all died along the way. And his two of them ended up in Racine, Wisconsin, and one ended up in Beirut. So I have relatives from the Beirut side as well, and his wife was from Adana, and she, as a young child, after the first massacres of 1909, went to Beirut, and so that Beirut side eventually came to America. But my grandfather was from, let's just say, Kayseri, but from, give it the Turkish present name. And my grandmother was from Adana. And then my mother's parents were from Harper, Bitlis, and they ended up staying in Turkey and were in Istanbul. And so my mother was born in Istanbul in 1930 and then came to America in the 50s to go to graduate nursing school. And she was in New Jersey. Typical Armenian story of the late 50s. She was in New Jersey, and my dad was in Racine, Wisconsin. But the Armenians all wanted to meet each other and maybe have some marriages or something. So she traveled, I think, by train to Milwaukee for a big Armenian function. And they met, and I'm guessing they fell in love and got married and had 4 children and raised all of us in Southern California in Torrance. So that's how you stay 100% Armenian, I guess.
Yeah. It's those Emmys, you got 3 of them, right?
That's correct. I strategically placed them over my shoulder just to make this beautiful
Yes.
set in my living room for you.
I could see them. They're beautiful. So what was each one of them for, like, which documentary?
So the first one was for the one on Africa, Burbank's African sister city. The second one was actually, the third one, of course, was Holocaust Soliloquy. So those 2 that I mentioned, I did everything. I, shot and produced. I mean, virtually, if there was 1% input from anybody, even on the writing or anything, I'd be surprised. There just wasn't. And, if I'm doing it and I'm spending my own money and kind of doing that, I like not the control in an obsessive way, but it's just great to have editorial control of a product, which generally you don't do. And that middle one was one where it was a collaborative effort at the city of Burbank where I was working. We do it when I was there every year. We did a State of the City video, and those were always very nice and still remain great videos about what's going on in the city that the mayor has a big hand in. And so we had 2 or 3 producers and 2 or 3 or 4 shooters and editors. And I primarily did shooting and editing for that one. So usually when you see people winning Emmys, you have 6 people on the stage. For the one that I shot in Africa or the one on the Holocaust, those were one-man band endeavors. And took me, a little while to do both of those. But the middle one is for a team effort that I did at the city of Burbank. And I have a whole bunch of golden mics, too, which I'm proud of. And those are done on a variety of topics. And you can look up most of those on the internet. But all 3 of those, especially the one on Africa and on the Holocaust, are going to be available online for as long as, YouTube exists. And people want to look them up. I'm sure 100 years from now, I don't know if anybody's going to be watching those, but maybe some educators or maybe some students of history. But because I own those to a certain extent, I own those, I give them away. I didn't do these things and then try to license them away and say, well, if you want to show it somewhere, you have to pay me money. Those are available anytime, anywhere, as are 2 other documentaries that I'm proud of. I did one on a 100-year-old genocide survivor, Hazaros Kademyan, who was from Zaytun, and then he went to Iraq, and then he came to America. He celebrated his 100th birthday in 2007, and I thought, there's a documentary I can do. I'm going to go to his birthday party, and then I'm going to follow him around for a year as he makes these efforts to politicians at community events, kind of what he did in the Armenian community. And then the anticipation that the genocide would be recognized by Barack Obama at the time, and then of course it wasn't. So that's part of the documentary, and that one's available. That's 50 minutes long, I think, and I think it got a couple of golden mics for editing and for videography. So it's, once again, it's not Schindler's List. It's not, The Promise.
But it's great.
But it's reality, and it's capturing real people doing real things for that moment in time. I mean, that can't be duplicated. It probably could be duplicated beautifully in a $100 million movie, but that was Hazaros, and I was just, once again, to be following him around for a year while he was doing these things. What a great opportunity. And then another one I did was, that's out there, it's 40 minutes long, called Historic Armenia. And once again, because I had a camera that I was about to get rid of, standard definition, but I thought, what's his name? Aroyan, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Armen Aroyan has traveled to Eastern Turkey, Western Armenia, probably 70 times, taking tour groups. And I saw one of them, and I said, "Oh, that would fit into my schedule. It costs about $2,000 or $3,000. Richard Hovhannissian is going to be on the trip. Perfect. I don't have to put a lot of producing thought into this." So I went on the trip, and I just kind of captured every moment. Armen Aroyan knew the places to go to. Richard Hovhannissian did a great job of prepping everybody the day before about the history of the place, and I just kind of pieced it together. And once again, I don't think that can be duplicated. There are people that go out with their iPhones and do nice things in historic Armenia and everything, but I think that 40-minute documentary with, kind of the king of Armenian studies programs and history, Richard Hovhannissian, as kind of a central figure going to all these places, can't be duplicated. And that hopefully will stand the test of time. Maybe people will find that of interest, 100 years from now. Probably not, because there's so much video and so much information out there. But those are the things that I'm very proud of, that I've had a chance to work on, that I think are unique. They're not just, there are a million, documentaries on similar topics. And, I don't want to do a travel piece in Paris, France. Like, here's the Eiffel Tower, and, here's the Champs-Élysées, and it's a beautiful place, and I enjoyed the escargot and the fine wine. I have zero interest in doing something like that. But doing these things that are unique, that no one else really has the time or the money to do, that's what I'm glad to contribute. That's my little contribution to the body of fictional and non-fictional work that is out there.
Well, you did a great job, man. For a one-man operation, getting all this, it's just incredible. It's congratulations.
Thank you.
You're wonderful. It's amazing when you are in this type of business, you land onto so many people. Bump into people like yourself. It's just like I never knew who is Peter before, But then there is those Armenians, like I go in Armenia and France and other places. You just bump somebody done so much. Like I was in Bangkok, and I thought, well, there must be some Armenian here. And so we dig around, and this Arto Artinian, a jewelry guy, I think his father or something, they moved into Bangkok, started making big factory, making jewelries. He put Armenian consulate in his office, in his facilities, and he become honorary consul. Let's go figure it out.
That's in Thailand, in Bangkok?
In Bangkok, right. And so we went there, we interviewed him, and and his wife, it's ironically, most of those people that I meet, they either woman married to foreigner or man married to foreigner. They do more to Armenia than real Armenian. It's bizarre, And there is this Australian guy married to Armenian woman. I mean, every day they go. They started this adopt a village things. And then also you have this chess player married to this Filipino. Now Armenian, they were making such a big noise. And was there no Armenian, But this woman is doing so much for Armenia. It's unbelievable. Instead of doing for Philippines, is doing for Armenia. I mean, I could go on and on, talk about those people who are married to another. I mean, Kardashian, I mean, everybody will love now when when she was going with this guy, everybody was saying, "Oh, Amot, Anamot," all that stuff, you know. And now everybody begged to just take a picture with him because she proved herself. She's a very capable woman. She could do lots of things, including for Armenians. So Armenians,
I'll say
it's
probably
like
the strength of Armenians is along those lines, is that we are critical, which means we're smart and we're thinking, critical in the sense of, a critique. But I'll tell you, I am not a guy that really appreciates negative criticism. Yes, you can criticize. You could have criticized Kim Kardashian early on. Oh, she did this and that. But you want to know something? Whenever I hear that, I say, you know what? She's the most famous Armenian of all time, and that's true. More than Kirk. People know she is, and she doesn't ignore her heritage. And when she sends out a tweet, guess what? It's not 200 people who get it or 10,000 people who get it. It goes out to millions and millions of people. So, and you can't argue with success. That her father was a very smart and successful attorney. Her non-Armenian mother is a smart woman, and they have raised a good family. And yes, they do a reality show, so all the warts and all the kind of sensationalism exists within that Hollywood world and everything. But that's, I'm sure, a little bit exaggerated. But the fact is that she is a smart woman who cares about things other than Armenian issues, and she cares about Armenian issues.
yes.
So I don't criticize her one bit, and I don't appreciate everybody. I'm sure someone could criticize this show. I'm sure someone could look at one of my documentaries and say, oh, he mispronounced this word, or he did this wrong, or why didn't you go to this place in historic Armenia? You want to know something? If you're that critical of it, why don't you go ahead and raise the money and do
Exactly.
Now, I'm not trying to be defensive about it.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, look at things carefully, try to improve on them, but don't engage in this unnecessary criticism. Come on, it is not constructive. I don't think.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's like, I think Kardashian, if I'm not mistaken, she has 60 million followers. I'm not 100% sure, but
I think you're right. I didn't know the number. I was going to say 10 million, but
imagine her tweet is much powerful than Trump tweet.
Yeah.
But anyway, like, I think last time I heard, 1% of Armenians around the world do the work of 99% of Armenians.
Are you making that up so you can be part of the top 1%, Wally?
No, but I'm not doing anything. But
no, you're doing a lot, and you are. Okay.
But that's the problem is. Now, here's the question I was going to ask you. You are a journalist. You've been in all these things.
Uh-huh.
How you deal with society like Armenians? They come from different world. They pick up different ideologies, different political background. And how do you deal with them? Because everybody try to pull you into their ideology, their whatever political belief and persuasion. And if you went to other side, you're sort of, who paid you, why you're doing this? How would you deal with that? Because, I don't discriminate against all. One day we talk good about Pashinyan. Next day we talk about when I went to Armenia, I interviewed three political party people, and so people don't like that. People somehow, everybody wants you to be on their side. Just say good things about them. How do you deal with that?
Luckily, I you don't have to have a thick skin, but I'm just an American kid, of Armenian heritage who grew up in Southern California, and don't have a lot of insecurities about certain things. But what you're describing is true, and once again, I say it's kind of a strength and a weakness in Armenia, but also in the diaspora, is that everyone has a certain kind of organization, whether it's cultural or political or whatever the case might be. And I don't like the bickering also amongst those groups, and you're a Hunshag, you're a Tashnag, you're a Ramgavar, oh, you're an AGBU guy, you're this guy, or you're with the prelacy, or you're with the diocese, or you're a Pochagan, whatever it is. I don't. I'm not high-minded. It never really registered with me. I know my mother had certain views coming from Istanbul. My dad had certain views, but they weren't instilled in me in a bigoted sense to not like certain organizations. Like, oh, the so-and-sos did this back in the 1920s, and it never affected me. And I always was just kind of this probably just empty-headed kid who, if an Armenian American or someone else was doing something in another part of the world, or an Armenian American was doing something, well, I was proud. I don't know what Ara Parsegian's politics were, the coach of Notre Dame, or Jerry Tarkanian, or Krikor Ohanyan, who was Mike Connors, or the one name I would see in the credits in the 1970s. I have no idea, and it really wasn't important. They were doing something that was positive. So, politically speaking, American politics, I don't know where the Armenian Assembly or the ANC necessarily fall within that, but I think those groups are doing very important work.
Yeah.
And I really have no criticism for either. I was an intern in the Assembly. I was on the board of the ANC. Some people would say, oh, they lean to the left or this or that, or they're affiliated with the Tashnaks or they are. I don't care. I mean, I'm at least smart enough to say, okay, I know perhaps maybe I know something about who Wally supports or where he leans left or right, but I'm just judging your show, or I'm judging the work you're doing. And if I can see that it's done without bias and it's a positive contribution to the community, I'm not going to say anything. In fact, I'm glad that exists. I'm glad those groups exist. I'm glad the AGBU exists. I'm glad that there are groups that look at Armenian literature and culture and dance and music and all that kind of stuff. Even though I'm not well versed in that, I am a product of my environment. So I'm also not going to criticize someone like, oh, he speaks Eastern Armenian, he speaks Western Armenian, he doesn't speak Armenian, oh, he's married to an Odar. Listen, if you're part of the 1% or the 10% or whatever it is that is making a positive contribution, I will recognize that. I will say, well, I don't know what the guy does in his private life or what his politics are. Now, the other part of that question is what's going on in Armenia. And I must once again admit, because I'm comfortable admitting, I do get 4 or 5 Armenian newspapers. Well, actually, it's now the number's gone down to 3, I think, because one of them went out of business, and they're the English language papers. I also get all kinds of emails and online publications now. Are you seeing me? It looks like I'm frozen.
No, I could see you. You're talking.
I think our connection was lost.
No, we're okay.
Oh, we're okay? Okay.
Yeah.
My thing froze up. It's freezing up. But if you can hear me, I'll just continue talking to myself.
I could hear
and
you.
Hopefully Okay. So I don't read Armenian, and I don't really, if I watch Armenian television for the news, I don't really, I understand like 30%. So as much as I believe I really understand American politics, every nuance, every candidate, every political party, I can read between the lines very well. I'm just the opposite when it comes to Armenian politics. And whether it was, Ter Petrosian was in, Kocharian and Sarkeesian, and now, I'm not a complete moron, but I never really formed, true to myself, opinions about what was going on. Certainly before this recent Velvet Revolution, we all heard the stories. It's all the whole place is corrupt. People are, robbing the country blind. They're messing the country up environmentally, and there were stories. And I'd pick up a story here or there, and I'd read it, and I would think, well, why isn't, I don't quite get it. People in the diaspora are still supporting these politicians, and what is their angle? I don't know. I just don't have enough to have an opinion. I'm very happy. I think there's a lot of hope in what just happened with Pashinyan getting into office. And I don't think that would have happened if we didn't have this active diaspora. There aren't a lot of Azerbaijanis in America or in the diaspora trying to or criticizing the authoritarian regime that's in Azerbaijan, and trying to overthrow or whatever it is they're trying to do. But we have people who are successful in all corners of the earth who want to see Armenia succeed. And what we've had over the last 20 years or so, or since 1991, 92, is a result of being under Soviet control for all those years. So I'm understanding of that. I understand there are oligarchs and there's corruption, but I never really understood how deep it was. I never saw good reporting on it. Like, this is what I see a story that, Sarkeesian's brother has a $2 million house in Tarzana or something, and so I see it, but I don't see a collective body of work on how bad it was. But as things progressed, we started seeing more of that. And my hat's off to all the diasporans who moved to Armenia, all the people in America and other places that contributed to making Armenia a little bit better place politically. And from what I can tell, there's still quite a lot of work to be done. And I don't know enough about the players. I don't know who's in his cabinet or who are the good people or the people that have an agenda. I don't know enough. All I know is that I kind of sit back like that kid growing up in Torrance who loves seeing an Armenian basketball coach or an Armenian baseball player or the one Armenian guy that was in politics at the time. And I applaud it, and I'm glad to see it. I want to see this country succeed, and I don't know what my contribution is, but I know people are making an effort to really have it flourish.
In Armenia, positively speaking, education-wise, technology-wise, they are progressing pretty good. Even military-industrial, they're getting into doing pretty good. In theater, live theater is packed. You go there, even the young children they take with them. In rural area, there is lots of desperation, but United Nations, European Union, they have lots of organization are helping there. But politically speaking, it's pretty messy. There's a lot of misinformation and conspiracy theories everywhere, and so you just don't want to even get into it. For example, I was talking to a couple of people in the street and here and there, and I wanted to know why they don't vote for Tashnak. They've been there 30 years, they can't make it. And so I was hearing some stupid stuff like they sold Western Armenia to the Turk, they sold Eastern Armenia to the communists. So I thought, okay, let's go talk to somebody in Tashnak here in Yerevan, see what is this things. So that's what I did. So I went high-ranking Tashnak, which one time he was even Minister of Economy, and he explained to me lots of things. I have a video. You could go and watch it. But eventually, basically what happening is during the communists, they had about 12, 15 movies. Every time there was Armenian public days, they would run those movies. Basically, they blackmailed Tashnak. And those middle-aged Armenian and up, they all believe in that. And so how do you change their mind? So I guess Tashnak, they have lots of marketing to do, clean up this garbage, But it's just perception, there's no truth to that. But that's what people believe in.
Like I said, I don't know all the players and all the nuances of Armenian politics, but what you're describing, and I've heard it described similarly, I understand politics and how a lot of it, unfortunately, is staking out a certain position ideologically and sticking with it, and then engaging in propaganda against your opponents, whether it was the old days, it was whispering campaigns, like, now it's all on the internet, all the time, people, and you don't know the sources of anything, even in this country. Is something you're reading, is that a far left publication, far right? Is it just something to provoke distrust? It is a kind of a dirty business in politics. And it's nice once in a while to maybe get someone who really is, not tainted by all this. But that's just the way it is. government in general, ruling over people in general, has been a very messy business in the world, and whether it was kings and queens or dictators. So you're going to have all kinds of nastiness and misinformation. So the fact that that's going on in Armenia, of course, that doesn't surprise me. I'm just hoping that maybe we're small enough and know that we have a history that doesn't really lend itself to engage in all this really negative kind of bickering that brings us down. Hopefully we can head in the right direction and really see if we can get half the country out of poverty and have not just the top 10% continue to do well, and I think they are, and I think there's a lot of possibilities in terms of high tech and everything, and I think that's great. But let's see it all trickle down, and let's see small countries succeed.
Before we finish this, I ask you this. I don't know how much you know about this wonderful guy who passed away. Here is his picture, Derderian. Do you know anything about him?
I know he's an academic, and I looked into his work because, as an example of saying I don't know this guy or that guy, when I did my documentary, another Armenian-themed documentary, the first one I did in 2006, we took a guy who was Armenian playing in the NFL. We took him to Armenia, and that was kind of like a travelogue, and he visited all these places, and that's online too, free of charge. The long journey from the NFL to Armenia. I got a phone call from this fine gentleman,
Three-time
not
Los
this guy that's on the
Angeles
screen
area
now,
Emmy
but,
award-winning
from New
journalist
York, I
Peter
think is where he
Musurlian
lived.
does it
and
all.
we had a nice long conversation, and he just wanted to buy a copy of the documentary. I said, I'll be glad to send you a copy. And so there's a guy that dedicated his life, much like we see a lot of other academics and other people, but in the academic world, the rich kind of Richard Ovanesian and the people that he's taught along the way at UCLA, who are now out there doing fantastic things in the world of academia. And sorry to see him go, but he lived a nice long life, like into his 90s, and really contributed a lot. But the sad thing is, of course, we see how fame is fleeting, or some good deeds go unrewarded. If you were to walk on the streets of Glendale or Boston or Providence or Fresno and say, do you know who this person is? They might not know. But within the certain community of people that are trying to make a difference, that are academics, that care about or the Armenian culture, he was one of the giants.
Yeah, many historian writers, when they write, even the Turkish historian Akçam, I believe his name, they always refer to his writing or his research, and so he was really incredible, contributed incredibly to Armenian cause and especially genocide. He did lots of research. So anyway, we had a great conversation. I'm just going to let you finish it, say whatever you want, then we'll close it.
Oh, I only answer your questions. I have no agenda to say anything spectacular other than thank you for setting this up. It took us a few hours here and there along the way, but it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful setup. It's an important show that you're doing, and I think everybody should promote your website, and people should sign up for your newsletter and everything else, and go to your Facebook page, because you are sending out information that a lot of people don't see. So I tip my hat to you.
Thank you, Peter. We wish you all the best, and congratulations again. You deserve it, and you got it.
All right. Thanks, Wally.
I hope to see you more often here in this show, and whatever something new you have, it'll be great, and all the best to you.
Very good. And you wanted to end the show, but I'll say this. I've been out in Southern California almost my entire life, almost 50 years. And the other time was in, Montana, Texas, D.C., and I was in Hungary for a short time doing some Army TV reporting. But we never got to, I don't think we ever ran into each other in Southern California. Yeah. So when you come out to Washington, D.C., be sure to give me a call, and we'll find some kind of Armenian food somewhere. They have a lot of Turkish restaurants out here, but we'll try to find an Armenian restaurant.
There is a Turkish big mosque in there, like a couple of million dollars.
They've got a couple, and that their food is similar to Western Armenian food, but we'll find a place.
Actually, I have in my plan in about the middle of September, probably going to D.C. I never been in D.C., believe it or not. Yeah.
Well,
Two cities I never been in America. I have no idea why. The one is New York, one is Washington D.C. So
be sure to contact me and we'll set something up.
all right.
Excellent.
Okay, you take care. Thanks for
Thanks,
coming.
Wally. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you into another episode.